Just a magnesium flash, and then silence, deeper than space itself. Leila Voss slammed into the bulkhead of Habitat Tranquility, visor fogging, ears ringing with a phantom noise that couldn't exist out here. The station had ruptured like a tin can. Ribs of alloy bent outward, panels flayed, a ribbon of frozen vapor unspooling into black. She forced her breath even. Oxygen, 1211. Power, 68%. Integrity, stable. She didn't believe the last line. Logs lied in polite words. Leila? The voice was ragged, closer than she expected. 10 meters away, a figure dragged itself from a crumpled airlock. Jonas Hale, systems engineer, young enough to joke with commanders, writhed onto the regolith. His forearm plating was torn. Emergency gel had foamed over the seam and set in a dull green scab. "Don't move," she said, bounding toward him in long, careful arcs. "Let me see." He tried a smile. "You sound like my mother." She palmed the crack, feeling the faint throb of pressure beneath her glove. The gel held, for now. "You're alive." "I hope so." His breath rasped inside his helmet. "Otherwise, this is a hell of a ghost story." Behind them, Tranquility's south module sighed inward on itself. The beacon mast that should have cut the sky with a pulse lay bent like a burnt match. Inside, someone's mug, blue ceramic, white-chipped rim, drifted against the viewport, then tapped it once and floated away. Silence pressed its weight on them. It didn't feel empty. It felt full of everything that wasn't there. Chapter 2. The Plan. The Tranquility Habitat's emergency cache lay half-buried beneath a rim of dust, its lid glazed with rime, the last intact piece of a home already broken. For a moment, Leila only stared, breath hitching. Tranquility had been loud with life. Filters humming, Jonas humming louder. Now it was ribs and wreckage. The box felt like the closest thing left to a farewell. Then she forced herself forward. She snapped the latch, pried it open, and inventoried by touch. Medpacks, thermal blankets, a scuffed exosuit, coils of line for vibroseismic transects, solar mats, ration gel. No rover. She stared at the empty recess where a folded chassis should have gleamed. Jonas eased himself down beside the cache, helmet to steel. "So, we wait for a cab?" "Bad news. I can't tip with vacuum." Leila thumbed the map module awake. The flat, pallid landscape rippled into contour over her HUD. A pulsing marker blinked in Cyrillic and English. Luna 23, a Soviet lander from the early 70s. Legend notes floated at the edge of her vision. Possible residual tanks, emergency beacon, experiment housings. Distance, 19.7 kilometers. Elevation change, 340 meters. Terrain, not recommended. Her stomach tightened. 19 kilometers. In these suits, with your arm leaking? Jonas tapped the blinking dot with one finger, as if the gesture could erase the danger. Could be worse. Could be 20. The terrain's fractured. Ridges, dust pockets. If the tanks are empty, then we die walking instead of waiting. He tried a grin, pale under his visor. At least the view's better out there than in here. She glanced up. Earth hovered half blue over the horizon. Clouds swirled in familiar gyres. And then, something shifted. A whole stretch of coastline, hundreds of kilometers long, was simply gone. Not hidden by cloud, not softened by shadow, but carved away with impossible precision, as if a blade had cut the world open. Ocean that nothing. Land erased in an instant. Her chest tightened until she thought her ribs would snap. For 3 heartbeats, she stared at the wound, dizzy, pulse rattling in her ears. Marcus lived somewhere under that horizon line. The thought landed like a hammer blow. Then the image flickered, normalized. The sea returned, the map unbroken, as though the planet had painted over its own scar. Her HUD insisted nothing had changed. She wanted to believe it. She couldn't. A glitch, her mind insisted. It had to be. Yet her chest tightened. Marcus lived somewhere under that horizon line. She told herself she'd imagined it. She had to. Jonas's voice softened. Leila, there's nowhere else. That dot is all we've got. Her chest ached with the weight of it. The committees had written her mission brief in cautious clinical language. Survey and recover artifacts from early lunar sites. Apollo descent stages. Soviet hardware. Heritage in situ. Preservation protocols strict. Proof of beginnings. A museum under glass. Now the heritage was rubble, the mission obsolete. The only thing left was survival. Jonas lifted his chin, his voice rough. Together. Leila's gaze swept the blinking marker, the ruin of tranquility at her back, the silent earth above. Her throat closed, but the word came anyway. Together, she said. Chapter 3. Leila's tranquility, and stepped into raw light. The wreck of the habitat hunched behind them. A twisted carcass half buried in its own debris. No beacon, no air, no second chance. Every footprint they made pointed away from the last shelter they would ever know. Leila clipped the line spool at her hip, the tether unreeling behind her in thin, silvery scribbles. 8 steps. Clip. 8 steps. Clip. She counted in her head to drown the other numbers ticking down on her HUD. Beautiful light out here, Jonas said after a while. If we make it, we should sell postcards. Greetings from the moon. Attempt at humor only made the silence louder. Leila forced herself to glance up. Earth loomed half blue on the horizon, huge and tender against the black. And then it burned. A bloom of light unfurled along the western curve of a continent. Too broad for storm, too steady for lightning, too deliberate for nature. A halo expanding outward, paling the oceans beneath it. Until the glow thinned and died, leaving behind a bruise-colored scar. Her pulse tripped. For a second she thought of Marcus, somewhere under that hemisphere. She told herself it could be anything. A solar flare reflection, a glitch in her visor. But the silence in her ears told her otherwise. Jonas, she said quietly, did you see that? He followed her gaze, visor tilted toward Earth. See what? The coast. It was gone. Then back. Her voice trembled, like somebody cut it out. A long beat of silence. Then his chuckle came thin, forced. Glitch in your HUD, Leila. Has to be. Earth doesn't just vanish. She wanted to believe him. She couldn't. Maybe home's prettier, she murmured, mostly to the inside of her helmet. Jonas chuckled, low and shaky. Home's a concept. Light here is free. Leila didn't answer. She kept walking, the line spooling out behind them. But her eyes stayed fixed on the planet overhead, waiting for it to flare again, knowing it would. Gray silence, chapter 4. The march settled into rhythm. Step, breath, hiss. Dust plumed in slow-motion clouds and fell again, obedient to gravity, too weak to matter. Jonas filled the silence with stories. About a dog that ate socks. About a teacher who fainted at his first spacewalk sim. His words spilled fast, uneven, like sand through a cracked sieve. I'm scared out of my skin, he admitted at last, voice thin in her ear. If I stop talking, it feels like the silence might eat me. Before she could answer, the channel ripped open, her comm shrieked with static, jagged as broken glass. Beneath it, voices flickered through, half phrases, strangled mid-breath, as if the channel itself were suffocating. Prosody. Containment failure. Evac zones collapsing. Radiation spike. Northern hemisphere. The feed cut, leaving only the whisper of her suit fans. Leila stopped dead. The phrase lodged like a shard. Northern hemisphere. Marcus was there. New York was there. She tasted iron on her tongue. Told herself it could have been a drill, a recorded loop, a ghost in the comms. Told herself anything that might keep her moving. Jonas was watching her through his visor. Breath fogging glass. That wasn't Houston, he said quietly. She didn't answer. Her mouth worked around the word she wouldn't say. Marcus. The silence fell heavier than before, as though the moon itself was listening. Gray silence, chapter 5. Careful, Leila said, as Jonas's boot slid across a glassy lip of basalt. A heartbeat later, her own voice answered her. Careful. The word came bent, distorted, as though it had traveled down a throat that wasn't hers and crawled back out again. But the cadence was hers. The syllables, the timbre, unmistakably her own voice, thrown back at her from nowhere. She froze. Jonas jerked his head toward her, eyes wide. "Wasn't me," he whispered. Her HUD flickered. Transmit none. Receive interference. The readout was calm, tidy, innocent. The emptiness behind it was not. A fine tremor buzzed through her teeth. She shut her mouth hard. Echo. Jonas said after a beat, too quickly. Maybe Holmes talking back. Glitch in the comm. Leila looked up. Earth hung low and swollen, a bruise-colored orb. A dark seam laced across the continent, not cloud, not night. The line ate its way inland, erasing cities like a row of bulbs going out. Her chest seized. New York was there. Marcus was there. Lights always on at home, his last message had said. A promise, casual and careless, as if words could hold up a whole coast. She blinked hard. But the horizon didn't bring him back. Jonas reached for the tether, his hand trembling. Keep moving. Please. Leila clipped forward, the line hissing through her harness. Behind them the silence deepened, patient, as though waiting for her to speak again, so it could answer. Gray Silence, Chapter 6. The ground fell away before them. A crater stretched wider than the maps had ever promised. A black bowl scooped out of the moon with careless violence. Its walls glittered with fused glass and old scars of impact. Leila clipped the tether to a jagged spur of rock and tested the pull. The line hummed with tension, too thin against so much dark. We're really doing this, Jonas muttered. His visor reflected a warped version of the abyss. Always wanted to rappel into hell. Guess I should have been more specific on the wish list. They began the descent. Boots scraped against glassy ledges. Dust slid away beneath their weight and drifted downward like ash into a bottomless pit. The tether whispered through their harness clips, steady as a clock. Halfway down, Leila risked a glance sideways. Jonas clung to the rope, arms trembling, his breaths fogging his visor in frantic bursts. The gel patch on his arm had cracked in thin lines, like ice breaking on a pond. Keep it slow, she said. Slow's my specialty. His laugh came out hoarse. Then broke into a cough he couldn't quite smother. Above them, the rim of the crater cut a clean circle against space. Beyond it, Earth loomed swollen and sick. A flare pulsed along its surface, a blinding blossom that rolled outward and left behind a continent-shaped bruise. Leila's grip faltered. She tightened it until her gloves ached. Marcus was somewhere under that spreading shadow, or had been. Jonas groaned softly. Almost there. Tell me we're almost there. She couldn't. The walls still fell away in steep glass slopes. Her boots slicked, pebbles skittering into silence. The crater swallowed the sound whole. For a moment it felt like the pit was pulling at her. Gravity bent wrong, as though the moon itself wanted them deeper. Gray Silence, Chapter 7. The tether sang a warning note. Too much weight, too much strain. Leila felt it shift in her gloves, subtle at first, then undeniable. The anchor above them sighed, and the line slipped free. She dropped 3 body lengths before she could even curse. Glass bit her palms. Dust exploded into slow, ghost-like plumes. Her stomach lurched against the drag of reduced gravity. Jonas lunged. His gauntlet closed around her wrist with a jolt that rattled her bones. The tether snapped taut again, swinging them both into the wall of the crater. The impact drove the air from her chest. Stars burst behind her eyes. Jonas grunted, low and broken. A new hiss filled her headset. She turned and saw it, a fresh tear zigzagging down his arm. Emergency gel bubbling weakly against the leak. Frost feathered out in fragile white lines across his suit. No, her fingers fumbled with sealant patches, pressing them down, praying pressure would hold. He coughed, a ragged sound that shook with laughter. Damn, Voss, you fall like an anvil. Shut up, you're bleeding air. Air's overrated. His grin was pale, his visor fogging. But hey, Beautiful view. Above the rim, Earth flickered again. A bloom of light, erasing another coastline. The reflection burned across his helmet like a false sunrise. Leila pressed harder. Sealing. The leak slowed but didn't stop. His breathing was shallow, each word a fight. Her HUD blinked red across his vitals. O2 critical. Structural integrity, failing. The line trembled in her grip, humming with their combined weight. For a moment, she thought she could feel the moon itself tugging, urging her to let go. Gray silence. Chapter 8. The rim broke beneath her hands like brittle glass. Leila hauled herself over and staggered onto a shallow plain where the light felt thinner, colors bleached and sharp. Luna 23 crouched ahead on splayed legs, its hull dented, 1 foot sunk deep. It looked less like a rescue and more like a grave marker. Jonas reached it a breath behind her, then slumped against the metal. His visor fogged and cleared in uneven bursts. Almost home, he rasped. Never thought I'd be a guest of the Soviets. She tore open a service hatch. Inside, tanks waited like relics. Needles trembled at ancient gauges. One read full. Hope flared in her chest, so bright it hurt. She snapped the coupling, jammed her suit hose into the port. The first breath scorched her throat with cold fire. O2, 205, 241, 336, 412. Then a sharp tick rang out. The O-ring split. Oxygen screamed out in a white veil. A bride's shroud torn into vacuum. No. She clamped her gloves over the leak, heart pounding in her ears. There was one way. She ripped the hose free, pressed the raw end against the valve, and inhaled. Ice filled her lungs. Blood burst in her lips, sticky against the inside of her helmet. The gauge crawled upward. Not safe, but not death. Not yet. She turned. Jonas was still in the hatchway, his head tilted back as if he'd tried to stand and forgotten how. The gel patch on his arm had fissured into spiderweb cracks. A thin fog bled across his visor. Jonas. His breath rasped once more. Then softer. Tell them, I tried. There is no them, not anymore, she whispered. Her glove touched his shoulder. Too late. Too useless. His visor frosted from the inside, and he was still. Leila's chest hitched. Above them, Earth flared again. Circles of fire irising outward. Oceans bruising. Cities burning invisible but certain. She imagined Marcus somewhere beneath that light, erased with the rest. She coughed blood, the copper sting clinging to her teeth, and kept the valve pressed to her lips. Gray silence. Chapter 9. A telescope module still clung to the lander's frame, half frozen in dust and neglect. Leila released the locks, its joints creaking like brittle bones, and swung the scope toward the rectangle of sky. Earth filled the lens. It shouldn't have fit there, but it did. Bloated, obscene, a carcass masquerading as a planet. Magnified, the surface broke apart into ruin. Continents were charred, their outlines warped and blackened. Oceans dulled to pewter, veined with sickly green swirls like rot spreading under skin. Auroras bled yellow and red, flickering over poles that should have glowed soft blue. Leila's breath stuttered. She turned the focus east, out of instinct more than hope. The coastline she had traced 1,000 times in maps and memories was gone. New York was gone. Marcus was gone. Her throat worked around a sound that never left her mouth. His last message burned in her ears. Lights always on at home. Don't worry about me. The world he promised was ash. Her gloves creaked as she gripped the scope, metal biting through the fabric. Not now, she whispered, though time had never once listened. The lander hummed faintly beneath her boots, indifferent. Outside the viewport, Earth turned slowly, showing her fresh scars, daring her to look away. She didn't. Gray silence. Chapter 10. The beacon module was a rusted cube bolted to Luna 23's flank, its panel half-fused by decades of dust storms and micrometeorite strikes. Leila brushed frost from the controls, her gloves trembling, and forced the switches into place. A guttural hum crawled through the hull. Lights stuttered. The antenna groaned skyward. joints squealing as if it resented being woken after half a century. She patched her suit feed into the transmitter. Her own voice sounded alien in her ears. Tranquility distress. 1 survivor. Coordinates attached. Please respond. Please. The beacon repeated her words, flattening them into metallic cadence. She waited. Seconds. Minutes. Only the hiss of circuits and the metronome of her heart. Again, she whispered, and triggered the cycle. The message went out once more. The beacon spoke her lines in endless rotation. 1 survivor. Coordinates attached. But nothing returned. No Houston. No ground control. No orbit relay. Not even a ghost of feedback. The silence was heavier than the void. Leila pulled her helmet against the lander's wall, as if pressing close might let her hear something human in the machine's throat. There was nothing. Only her own words circling back, strangled and metallic, until they sounded like someone else entirely. She shut her eyes. For a moment, she almost believed the silence was repeating her, practicing her words like a child learning language. When she opened them, the earth hung fat and red above the horizon, watching. Gray Silence, Chapter 11. The lander's storage bay was a coffin of dust and shadows. Leila pried open a hatch stiff with age, hinges squealing like things long buried. Inside, a box, metal, sealed with Soviet stencils half-eaten by corrosion. Not supplies, not tools. Something meant to stay hidden. Her hands shook as she worked the clasps. The lid gave way with a sigh, releasing air older than she was. A shape lay within. Compact, jointed, folded tight as a sleeping insect. Limbs curled to its chest. A blank oval for a face. Not a relic, not exactly. She brushed frost from the surface. Under her glove, a sensor flared alive. 1 tiny diode blinking, once, then again, in patient rhythm. Blink, pause, blink. Her HUD lit in sync. Signal detected. The diode's glow was the color of false dawn, washing her visor with pale fire. Prosody. It pulsed like a heartbeat, steady, unhurried, as though it had been waiting for her all along. Leila's breath fogged the glass. "What are you?" The thing didn't answer. It only blinked. And in the silence between pulses, she thought she heard her own voice again, practicing the question as if preparing to speak back.